The war had been raging for decades, a relentless clash between humanity and the enigmatic Jatari Empire. Their technology was beyond comprehension, their ships sleek and silent as they cut through Earth's skies like knives slicing silk. The humans fought with every ounce of courage and desperation they could muster, but it wasn't enough. Cities burned, oceans boiled under orbital bombardments, and billions perished in what felt like an endless cycle of despair. Yet amidst the chaos, there were whispers, rumors that spread among soldiers huddled in bunkers or civilians hiding in underground shelters. Whispers of her. She was known only as the Radiant Sovereign, ruler of the Jatari Empire, whose beauty was said to transcend mortal understanding. Tales described her skin shimmering faintly, like starlight captured on flesh, and eyes so vast and deep they seemed to hold galaxies within them. Some claimed she glided rather than walked, her presence commanding awe even from those who hated her kind. Others spoke of how she never raised her voice yet commanded absolute loyalty from her people. To humanity, she was both nightmare and fascination, a figurehead of the enemy that crushed their hopes while simultaneously embodying something otherworldly and unknowable. For Private Elias Grant, these stories were little more than distractions during rare moments of respite. He'd enlisted at 18, young and idealistic, believing he could make a difference. Now, 10 years later, all he knew was survival. His unit had dwindled from dozens to just 3, himself, Corporal Marichan, and Lieutenant Arlo Hayes. They moved through ruins littered with broken glass and twisted metal, scavenging supplies and avoiding patrols. The air smelled of ash and ozone, a constant reminder of the devastation around them. One evening, as they camped in the remnants of an old library, Elias found himself staring at a tattered magazine someone had left behind long ago. On its cover was a crude artist's rendering of the alien queen based on intercepted transmissions. She looked serene, almost ethereal, her expression unreadable yet strangely inviting. It struck him then, not for the first time, that this conflict wasn't just about territory or resources, it was personal. The Jatari wanted Earth not merely because it suited their needs, but because it represented something primal to them. And maybe, just maybe, this queen held the key to ending everything. "What are you looking at?" Mara asked, nudging him gently. Her face was smudged with dirt, exhaustion etched into every line. "Nothing," Elias muttered, closing the magazine. But his mind lingered on the image. If she really was as powerful and influential as the rumors suggested, perhaps there was another way out of this hell. A thought began to form, fragile and dangerous, but one he couldn't shake no matter how hard he tried. The transmission came late one night, crackling over their battered comms device. It wasn't encrypted like most military broadcasts, it didn't need to be. Everyone listening understood its weight immediately. An offer had been made by the Jatari Empire. Peace, but at a price. Humanity would surrender unconditionally, relinquishing control of Earth entirely. In exchange, the Jatari promised to spare what remained of the human population, allowing survivors to live under their rule without further bloodshed. There was one condition, however, one that sent shockwaves rippling through every corner of the resistance. To seal the agreement, a human representative would wed the Radiant Sovereign herself. Not a politician, not a diplomat, but a soldier, a frontline fighter chosen randomly from among the ranks. The message ended abruptly, leaving behind silence heavier than any artillery barrage. 4 hours, no one spoke. Even the hum of machinery seemed muted, as if the world itself held its breath. Elias sat cross-legged on the cold floor of their makeshift shelter, staring blankly at the wall. Around him, others whispered furiously, debating whether this was mercy or mockery. Was it a genuine attempt at resolution, or some twisted game designed to humiliate them further? No one trusted the Jatari, they couldn't afford to, but the alternative was annihilation. Slowly, reality settled in. Someone would have to go. Someone would have to stand before her, bound forever to the enemy. When the lottery results arrived 2 days later, Elias barely flinched when his name echoed through the speakers. Perhaps deep down, he'd expected it. Or maybe he simply didn't care anymore. Death had become such a familiar companion that trading it for life, even one shackled to an alien queen, felt almost merciful. As orders filtered down and preparations began, he found himself oddly calm. The protests of his comrades barely registered. Their anger felt distant, muffled by the inevitability of it all. "You don't have to do this," Mara insisted, gripping his arm tightly. Her voice cracked under the strain of emotion. There has to be another way. There isn't, Elias replied, his tone flat but firm. If I don't, someone else will. And if no one does, he trailed off, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. Mara released him, stepping back as tears welled in her eyes. They're monsters, she spat bitterly. This whole thing, it's insane. Maybe, Elias said softly. But insanity is all we've got left. The journey to the Jatari flagship took place aboard a sleek, black transport vessel devoid of windows or comforts. Elias sat alone in the passenger compartment, surrounded by pristine white walls that seemed to pulse faintly with an inner light. The hum of the engines vibrated through the floor beneath his boots, steady and unyielding. No guards accompanied him. None were needed. The ship systems ensured compliance, locking down sections of the craft should he attempt anything foolish. Not that he planned to. What purpose would resistance serve now? As the hours dragged on, Elias found himself replaying memories of Earth, the laughter of children chasing each other through green fields, the smell of rain-soaked streets after a summer storm, the warmth of sunlight filtering through leaves. These fragments of humanity felt surreal, like scenes from a dream slipping further away with each passing moment. Would he ever see them again? Would anyone? The thought gnawed at him, though not with the sharpness of fear. Instead, it was a dull ache, a quiet resignation to whatever fate awaited him. When the ship finally docked, Elias disembarked into a corridor bathed in soft, golden light. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something floral he couldn't identify, cool against his skin. Ahead, two towering figures stood waiting, Jatari warriors clad in sleek armor that shimmered like liquid mercury. Their elongated limbs moved with unnatural grace, and their faces, partially obscured by masks etched with intricate patterns, exuded an aura of detached authority. They didn't speak as they escorted him forward, their footsteps silent despite their imposing size. The procession led him through labyrinthine halls adorned with glowing runes that pulsed rhythmically along the walls. Each step carried him deeper into the heart of the ship, where gravity seemed lighter, almost buoyant. At last, they reached a massive chamber dominated by a dais at its center. Upon it stood a throne carved from material that appeared to shift and swirl like molten silver. And seated, her presence was overwhelming, far surpassing anything the crude depictions on Earth had suggested. Her skin did indeed shimmer, but not with mere starlight. It radiated as though containing entire constellations within its depths. Her eyes, impossibly large and luminous, locked onto his with an intensity that froze him mid-step. She wore flowing robes of iridescent fabric that seemed alive, rippling gently even in stillness. Around her neck hung a delicate chain bearing a pendant shaped like a crescent moon, its edges glowing faintly blue. For several long seconds, neither of them moved. Then, with fluid elegance, she rose from her throne and descended the steps toward him. Her movements weren't hurried, yet they carried an undeniable purpose. When she stopped mere feet away, Elias forced himself to meet her gaze, though doing so felt akin to staring directly into the sun. "You are Elias Grant," she said, her voice resonating with a melody that defied description. It wasn't loud, yet it filled the room, wrapping around him like a tangible force. "You have come to fulfill your people's end of our agreement." "Yes," he managed, his own voice rough in comparison. "I'm here." A flicker of something, curiosity, amusement, passed across her features. "Do you understand the significance of what you undertake?" "Not really," he admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. "But I know my world depends on it." Her lips curved slightly, though whether it was a smile or something else entirely, he couldn't tell. "Then let us begin." With those words, the ceremony commenced. Alien attendants emerged from shadowy alcoves, carrying artifacts Elias couldn't comprehend. One held a crystalline orb that emitted low, harmonic tones when touched, while another bore a ceremonial blade forged from a substance that sparkled like diamond dust. Though he couldn't follow the ritual's intricacies, he sensed its importance, felt the weight of centuries-old traditions pressing down upon him. At one point, the sovereign extended her hand, palm upward, and Elias hesitated only briefly before placing his own atop it. Her touch was cool, almost electric, sending a shiver coursing through his body. She murmured words in her native tongue, melodic and haunting, and though he understood none of them, their meaning seemed to resonate within him nonetheless. By the time the final rites concluded, Elias felt changed, not physically, but in ways too subtle to articulate. Whatever bond had been forged between them transcended language and comprehension, tying him irrevocably to this alien queen and, by extension, her empire. As the ceremony drew to a close, the sovereign stepped back, studying him with an inscrutable expression. "You are mine now," she declared, her voice carrying both command and promise. "And I am yours." The days following the ceremony blurred together in a haze of unfamiliarity and unease. Elias found himself confined to opulent quarters within the Jatari flagship, chambers far grander than anything he'd ever imagined. Towering ceilings arched overhead, adorned with luminescent panels that mimicked the shifting hues of a twilight sky. The furniture, if it could even be called that, was crafted from materials that seemed to breathe, shifting subtly under his touch. Every surface gleamed with an ethereal glow, casting the room in perpetual soft light. Despite the luxury, however, the space felt suffocating, its alien design serving as a constant reminder of his captivity. Meals arrived at regular intervals, brought by silent attendants who moved with mechanical precision. The food itself was unrecognizable yet surprisingly palatable, consisting of dishes that dissolved on his tongue like bursts of flavor suspended in liquid. Yet no matter how exquisite the cuisine, it tasted bitter to him, tainted by the knowledge that each bite marked another step further from everything he once knew. Sleep eluded him, haunted by dreams of barren landscapes and echoing voices calling his name. When he did manage to drift off, he woke disoriented, unsure if hours or minutes had passed. The sovereign visited sporadically, her presence both magnetic and unsettling. She rarely spoke during these encounters, instead observing him with those vast, galaxy-like eyes. Sometimes she would gesture for him to follow, leading him through winding corridors to vast observation decks where stars stretched endlessly beyond transparent walls. Other times, she simply sat across from him, her posture regal yet relaxed, as though testing his patience, or perhaps her own. He struggled to reconcile her dual nature, the fierce ruler capable of annihilating worlds with a single command, and the enigmatic being who watched him with an intensity that bordered on curiosity. Despite her aloof demeanor, there were fleeting moments when Elias glimpsed something softer beneath her composed exterior. Once, as they stood side by side gazing at a nebula swirling lazily outside the ship's viewport, she pointed to a cluster of stars and murmured, "This is where my people began." Her voice carried a wistfulness he hadn't expected, tinged with pride and sorrow. Another time, when he accidentally knocked over an ornate vase, she surprised him by laughing, a sound so melodious it made his chest tighten. These small interactions hinted at layers of complexity he couldn't fully grasp, leaving him torn between resentment and reluctant fascination. His attempts to communicate were met with mixed success. While the sovereign understood his language perfectly, she preferred responding in her own, forcing him to rely on gestures and context. Occasionally, she would pause mid-sentence, tilting her head as if considering whether to translate her thoughts into terms he might comprehend. This unpredictability kept him perpetually off balance, unsure whether she viewed him as a partner, a prisoner, or something else entirely. Still, he couldn't deny the growing sense of connection, fragile and fraught as it was. Whether born of necessity or genuine curiosity, their bond deepened incrementally, each interaction chipping away at the walls separating them. Yet uncertainty lingered, coiled like a serpent in the shadows. Why had she chosen him specifically? What role did she envision for him beyond this symbolic union? And perhaps most troubling of all, what did she truly want from him? These questions haunted him, whispering doubts that refused to be silenced. News of the ceasefire spread quickly, rippling across Earth like wildfire. For the first time in decades, skies cleared of smoke, and the deafening roar of battle gave way to an eerie silence. Survivors emerged cautiously from bunkers and ruins, blinking against sunlight many had forgotten existed. Relief mingled with disbelief as reports confirmed the cessation of hostilities. The Jatari fleets withdrew from orbit, their ships vanishing into the void as swiftly and silently as they had arrived. Humanity was free, for now. But at what cost? Reactions to the marriage pact varied wildly. Some hailed Elias as a hero, a sacrificial lamb who had traded his freedom for the survival of billions. Statues were erected in his honor, their faces carved hastily from stone and metal, while songs extolling his bravery echoed through makeshift settlements. Others condemned him as a traitor, accusing him of abandoning humanity to its conquerors. Protests erupted in cities reduced to rubble, angry mobs chanting slogans that blurred hatred for the Jatari with disdain for the man who had tied himself to their queen. Amidst the chaos, families clung to one another, grappling with the enormity of what had transpired. Parents told wide-eyed children tales of the brave soldier who saved them, though few believed the story themselves. In refugee camps scattered across scorched landscapes, debates raged late into the night. Could peace truly endure under such terms? Was it worth sacrificing one man's life to save countless others? The questions hung unanswered, festering like open wounds. Elias' comrades reacted with equal parts fury and grief. Mara Chen refused to speak of him, retreating into stoic silence whenever his name arose. Lieutenant Hayes, once a pillar of strength, grew withdrawn, his usual optimism replaced by simmering resentment. "He sold us out," Hayes muttered during one particularly heated argument, slamming his fist against a crumbling wall. "No matter how you spin it, that's what happened." Others disagreed, defending Elias' decision as necessary, even noble. Yet beneath their arguments lay a shared pain, a collective mourning for the friend they felt they'd lost forever. As weeks turned to months, the initial fervor began to wane, replaced by a fragile semblance of normalcy. Farmers returned to charred fields, planting seeds in soil still laced with ash. Engineers worked tirelessly to rebuild infrastructure, cobbling together power grids from salvaged parts. Schools reopened in tents and basements, teachers scribbling lessons on scraps of paper. Life went on, haltingly and imperfectly, but it went on. Still, reminders of the war, and Elias' sacrifice, remained everywhere. Posters bearing his likeness fluttered in the wind, faded but defiant. Radio broadcasts occasionally featured messages purportedly from him, though skepticism abounded regarding their authenticity. The truth was, no one really knew what had become of him. All they had were stories and hope. Elias' existence aboard the Jatari flagship oscillated between moments of profound clarity and suffocating ambiguity. Days stretched into weeks, each marked by routines that felt both foreign and inevitable. Mornings began with meditative rituals conducted in a chamber bathed in pale, shifting light. The sovereign joined him, guiding him through exercises that required focus and stillness. At first, Elias resisted, his restless mind rebelling against the enforced tranquility. But gradually, he discovered a strange solace in the practice, a fleeting escape from the turmoil within. The sovereign observed him closely during these sessions, her gaze unwavering yet gentle, as though gauging his progress, or perhaps searching for something deeper. Afternoons were spent exploring the ship, a task that initially filled him with trepidation but eventually became a source of fascination. The sovereign often accompanied him, explaining the purpose of various chambers and technologies with a patience that belied her imperial bearing. He learned of hydroponic gardens where vibrant flora thrived without sunlight, their roots submerged in nutrient-rich fluids that pulsed faintly with bioluminescence. He marveled at libraries containing scrolls made of translucent material, inscribed with glowing script that shifted when touched. Each discovery peeled back another layer of the Jatari's advanced civilization, revealing a culture steeped in artistry and intellect. Yet despite the wonders surrounding him, a persistent ache lingered, a longing for the simplicity of Earth's imperfections. Evenings brought moments of intimacy, though they remained fraught with tension. Meals were shared in silence, punctuated by cautious conversation, topics ranging from trivial observations to probing questions about their respective worlds. The sovereign displayed an insatiable curiosity about humanity, asking Elias to recount stories of his childhood, his family, his dreams before the war. In turn, she offered glimpses into her own past, tales of ancient ceremonies and celestial migrations that painted her people as wanderers bound by duty. These exchanges fostered a tentative rapport, yet beneath the surface lay unspoken truths neither dared confront. What did she truly think of him? Did she see him as more than a pawn in her grand design? And what of her feelings, if she possessed any at all? Nights were the hardest. Alone in his quarters, Elias wrestled with emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. Guilt gnawed at his conscience, whispering accusations of betrayal. He envisioned faces of those left behind, Mara's fierce loyalty, Hayes' weary determination, and wondered if they hated him now. Dreams plagued him, vivid and disjointed, blending memories of Earth with surreal visions of alien landscapes. Sometimes, he woke gasping, convinced he heard voices calling his name, only to find the room empty save for the soft glow of luminescent walls. Sleep became a battleground, fought nightly against the specter of isolation. Through it all, the sovereign remained an enigma, her actions oscillating between kindness and calculation. She gifted him trinkets imbued with significance he couldn't fully grasp, a pendant carved from crystalline stone, a vial containing liquid that shimmered like starlight. Each offering carried weight, yet their true meaning eluded him. Was she trying to bridge the gap between them, or simply fulfilling ceremonial obligations? He couldn't tell. What he did know was that her presence anchored him, however tenuously, to a reality that otherwise felt poised to slip away entirely. As time passed, Elias began to notice subtle changes within himself. The anger that had once burned so fiercely started to dim, replaced by a quiet resolve. He realized he wasn't just surviving, he was adapting, learning, growing. Whether this transformation stemmed from necessity or something deeper, he couldn't say. All he knew was that the line between captor and companion grew increasingly blurred, leaving him adrift in a sea of contradictions. And somewhere, amidst the chaos of his thoughts, a question began to take root. Could he find purpose here, even if it meant forsaking everything he'd ever known? Months turned into years aboard the Jatari flagship, and the initial strangeness of Elias' existence began to settle into a rhythm both alien and familiar. The Sovereign continued to guide him through her world, revealing its secrets with an almost maternal patience. Together, they explored vast archives filled with holographic records of her people's history, witnessing the rise and fall of civilizations that predated humanity by millennia. Through these experiences, Elias gained a newfound appreciation for the depth and complexity of the Jatari culture. They were not merely conquerors. They were explorers, philosophers, artists. Their motivations remained elusive, but their achievements undeniable. Their bond deepened during these shared moments, evolving from wary tolerance to something resembling genuine companionship. Conversations flowed more freely now, less constrained by formalities. The Sovereign confided in him stories of her youth, tales of rebellion against rigid traditions and the burden of leadership thrust upon her at an early age. In return, Elias recounted fragments of his own life, childhood adventures, the camaraderie of his unit, the horrors of war. These exchanges bridged gaps between them, weaving threads of mutual understanding that strengthened their connection. Yet challenges persisted. Moments of vulnerability exposed cracks in their relationship, tensions simmering beneath the surface. Once, during a heated discussion about Earth's future under Jatari rule, Elias' frustration boiled over. "You speak of peace," he snapped, "but your kind still holds my planet hostage. How can I trust you?" The Sovereign's expression hardened, her eyes flashing with restrained anger. "Trust must be earned," she replied icily, "by both sides." That night, Elias retreated to his quarters, consumed by guilt and doubt. Had he pushed too far? Would she retract the fragile trust they'd built? Resolution came unexpectedly the following morning. The Sovereign summoned him to a private garden aboard the ship, a sanctuary of lush vegetation and cascading waterfalls. She approached him with measured steps, her demeanor softened. "Your words yesterday, they angered me," she admitted, her voice tinged with vulnerability. "But they also reminded me why I chose you. You challenge me, Elias. You force me to see beyond my own perspective." Her admission caught him off guard, stirring emotions he struggled to contain. For the first time, he glimpsed the woman behind the crown, a leader burdened by responsibility yet yearning for authenticity. These revelations reshaped their dynamic, fostering a partnership grounded in mutual respect. They collaborated on initiatives aimed at easing Earth's transition under Jatari governance, advocating for policies that balanced authority with autonomy. Elias found himself wielding influence he hadn't anticipated, his insights valued by both human representatives and Jatari officials. Yet amid these triumphs, shadows loomed. Rumors circulated among the Sovereign's court, whispers questioning the wisdom of her alliance with a human. Some viewed him as a liability, a symbol of weakness in an otherwise ironclad regime. Elias sensed the tension, recognizing the precariousness of their position. The Sovereign shielded him from overt hostility, her protection unwavering yet tinged with sadness. Change frightens many, she explained one evening, her fingers tracing patterns on a luminescent table. Our union represents more than peace. It signifies evolution. Not everyone is ready for that. Her words resonated deeply, mirroring his own internal struggles. He grappled with identity, torn between loyalty to his origins and acceptance of his new reality. Who was he now? A soldier? A diplomat? A husband bound to an alien queen? Despite uncertainties, their relationship flourished, nurtured by shared adversity and quiet moments of intimacy. They danced under simulated starlight, their movements awkward yet sincere. They laughed over cultural misunderstandings, finding joy in differences that once seemed insurmountable. Love blossomed slowly, tentatively, rooted in resilience rather than romance. It wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was real. As they navigated this uncharted territory, plans emerged for a monumental event, a summit bringing together leaders from both species to forge a lasting treaty. The sovereign envisioned it as a turning point, a chance to solidify unity and dispel lingering animosities. Elias embraced the opportunity, channeling his experiences into efforts aimed at reconciliation. Together, they prepared diligently, aware of the stakes involved. Success could usher in an era of unprecedented cooperation. Failure might reignite the flames of war. Yet beneath the surface of preparation lay undercurrents of unease. Whispers of dissent grew louder, fueled by factions resistant to change. Threats emerged, subtle yet unmistakable, targeting both the sovereign and Elias. Security tightened around them, isolating them further from the very people they sought to unite. Tensions escalated, culminating in a confrontation that shattered illusions of stability. During a diplomatic gathering, a rogue Jatari official publicly denounced the alliance, accusing the sovereign of compromising her people's integrity. Chaos erupted, forcing Elias and the sovereign to flee amidst shouts of betrayal and rage. In the aftermath, seclusion became their refuge. Hidden away in secure chambers, they confronted harsh realities. "This path will not be easy," the sovereign confessed, her voice heavy with resolve. "But turning back is no longer an option." Elias nodded, determination hardening within him. They had come too far to surrender now. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, bound by a commitment forged in fire and tempered by love. Together, they devised strategies to counteract opposition, leveraging alliances and exposing hidden agendas. Progress was slow, fraught with setbacks and sacrifices. Yet each victory, no matter how small, reinforced their belief in the possibility of harmony. As preparations for the summit resumed, hope flickered anew, fragile yet enduring. The journey ahead promised trials unimaginable, but Elias and the sovereign faced them with unwavering resolve, united by a vision of peace that transcended borders and species. The eve of the summit arrived, cloaked in an atmosphere of anticipation and dread. Delegates from across Earth and the Jatari Empire gathered aboard the flagship, their footsteps echoing through corridors adorned with banners representing unity. For Elias and the sovereign, the day had been a blur of final negotiations, security briefings, and ceremonial rehearsals. Exhaustion weighed heavily on them both, yet adrenaline coursed through their veins, keeping fatigue at bay. As they stood together in a private chamber overlooking the assembly hall, the sovereign turned to him, her luminous eyes reflecting the kaleidoscope of emotions swirling within. "This is it," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the distant hum of activity. "Tomorrow, we either solidify our future or risk losing everything." Elias nodded, his throat tight with unspoken fears. "We've done all we can," he replied, forcing confidence into his tone. "Now it's up to them." Her gaze lingered on him, searching for reassurance, or perhaps seeking to offer it. "I chose you for a reason, Elias. Not just because you were willing to sacrifice yourself, but because you embody resilience. Whatever happens tomorrow, remember that." Her words stirred something deep within him, a mixture of pride and apprehension. He reached out instinctively, brushing his fingers against hers. The contact sent a jolt through him, grounding him in the present. "And I chose to stay," he said softly. "Not because I had to, but because—" His voice faltered, the weight of his feelings threatening to overwhelm him. "Because I believe in what we're trying to build." Before she could respond, the door slid open, admitting a pair of royal advisors who bowed low before speaking urgently in hushed tones. The sovereign listened intently, her expression unreadable, while Elias stepped aside, allowing protocol to dictate the moment. Yet even as the advisors outlined last-minute contingencies, his mind raced ahead, envisioning scenarios that ranged from triumphant success to catastrophic failure. Each possibility felt equally plausible, each outcome hanging precariously in the balance. Later that night, as the delegates retired to their quarters and silence enveloped the ship, Elias found himself unable to rest. He wandered aimlessly through dimly lit corridors, his thoughts spiraling. Memories of Earth intermingled with visions of the sovereign's radiant smile, creating a tapestry of conflicting desires and responsibilities. He paused before a viewport, gazing out at the infinite expanse of stars. Somewhere beyond those pinpricks of light lay answers, and dangers, he couldn't yet fathom. A soft sound drew his attention, and he turned to see the sovereign approaching, her presence both comforting and daunting. She joined him at the viewport, her reflection shimmering faintly in the glass. Neither spoke for a long while, content to share the quietude. Finally, she broke the silence. "Are you afraid?" she asked, her tone gentle yet probing. Elias hesitated, weighing his response. "Yes," he admitted. "But not for myself. For us. For everyone counting on this to work." She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch cool yet reassuring. "Fear is natural. It means we care. But caring alone won't be enough tomorrow. We must act, with conviction, with courage." Her words ignited a spark within him, banishing doubt if only momentarily. He straightened, meeting her gaze with renewed determination. "Then let's make sure we leave no room for failure." As dawn approached, casting the ship in hues of gold and crimson, Elias and the sovereign returned to their chambers. They reviewed plans one final time, ensuring every detail was accounted for. When at last they parted ways to prepare for the day ahead, a shared glance conveyed volumes: trust, resolve, and an unspoken promise to see this through together. Whatever awaited them in the hours to come, they would face it side by side, bound not just by duty but by something far deeper.